how can I become better is by creating a seasonal routine. One of the things was to wake up early in the morning and work out.
The flow of your 20s is different than the flow of your 30s.
I'm not the only one. Everybody deals with the environmental changes.
Welcome to Keep Hustling. Welcome to Keep Hustling, where we are going past the why to get to the how. I'm your host, the always hustling Aaron Gordon, aka NY Risk Advisor, aka Mr. Keep Hustling. In this podcast, we will be diving deep into the professional and personal successes of our guests to find out how they hustled through the most difficult times in their life and their development to achieve the success they've gotten to today. So buckle up for what hopes to be an amazing ride. And of course, now and always, keep hustling. Welcome to Keep Hustling with my guest, Ruben Gomez. Ruben, thank you so much for being here today.
Oh, thank you so much, Aaron. Looking forward to it.
I'm going to be totally honest with you when we set this up. And then when you got on it, I said, how are you today? And I heard your accent. Omaha, Nebraska was definitely not where I thought you were going to say you're from. But, I love being surprised every day, so we'll take it.
Oh, I get that every single time. I'm originally from Venezuela and I moved to the Midwest to play baseball. I met my wife and then I stay here. And yeah, that's the exact reaction I get every single time.
So I love that. And I love how you're from Venezuela. You came to the United States. And at some point, and I urge everyone to read, as I always say, read the bio. I don't go to the full bios here because most people just will skip over them. I think that you describe changing your mentality when you hit what you call an invisible wall. And I want to ask you two questions relating to that to open the podcast, and then I want to press in on some philosophy, which we mentioned we were discussing. I love it. The first is, can you take us before the invisible wall? Can you take us to the invisible wall? It's a 4-part question. Right after the invisible wall, and then when you got past that invisible wall, and I can remind you of these, don't worry. What made you want to help others and take those lessons or wherever you had come to and transfer those on? So it's a long
Man,
question,
that's like
but it's
the
all
origin
yours.
story of everything that I'm doing. So originally from Venezuela, I grew up in the tropic. All season round was just summertime. So when I moved to the Midwest, that was back in 2010. I was 21 years old. I was going to college, playing baseball. It was exciting. I was living at the dorms. 3 years later, I get married. I move into the city of Omaha. We bought a few houses, and real life kind of starts. And that's when I realized I was hitting a wall because I went for 2 weeks. I'm like with this anxiety, depression, confusion kind of pattern. I'm an entrepreneur. I'm a real estate investor to this day. And at the time, you get a lot of freedom, but that freedom sometimes comes with a cost that if you don't get on your schedule, you're wasting a lot of time. And I realized what's going on. I never felt this way. I'm a hustler. I'm an entrepreneur. I'm a go getter. Like, what am I dealing with here? So after 2 weeks of feeling this way, I tell to my wife at the dinner table, and she's like, "Oh, sweetie, you just have the winter blues." So just to put it into perspective, it's January. It's Omaha. It's gray. It's cold. It's kind of wet. And I'm spending all my days inside. I'm kind of at that time I wasn't exercising. And again, it was something new to me. I'm like, what is the winter blues? What's going on? So that's like the wall. And that is the recognition that's like right after I recognize, okay, this is a problem. I would love to say that changed everything, but in reality, it took about 2 to 3 years to start kind of becoming aware that there was an actual pattern. And at the beginning, I thought the winter is the enemy. But as I started to discover, this is like an up and down kind of event that I was experiencing all year round. It wasn't just the winter, it was the summer. I was getting too high, like too hyper, taking too much action in the wrong direction, perhaps. And what started to lead me into was kind of like the transformation process of understanding that my routine had a big impact. And when the environment changed, my routine will follow. Now I can explain that from all multiple angles nowadays, but at the time that was like the big, oh, there is something in here. So when the environment changes, my how can I become better is by creating a seasonal routine. So I take you back to 2020, nothing to do with COVID, but I was transitioning businesses, building a new business, and I realized, I mean, this is kind of ambitious what I want to do now. If I want to succeed at this, I have to have a very good routine. It was kind of one of the first times that I went from goal setting to routine setting, which is kind of what allows you to hit your goal anyways. And I created a routine for the winter, which was like the worst time of the year for me. And that winter was the best winter of my life. Like, I had two mentors at the time, I was building two businesses, and everything kind of went right. As we transition into the spring, that's kind of like another wall story. Is that I continue doing what got me to be successful in the winter. One of the things was to wake up early in the morning and work out. Like, it was easy in the winter now knowing this because I went to sleep at 9 p.m. and I would wake up at like 5 a.m. I sleep 8 hours, and that was great. But in the springtime, we got daylight savings time. Boom. Not just daylight savings time, but it was now getting darker by like 8 p.m. So I was naturally going to sleep later. And then I wasn't waking up at 5 in the morning. So I dropped the exercise. The sleep was out of whack because I wasn't sleeping as good. Anyways, I kind of went back, 2 years in the making. I just kind of went back again. And that's when I realized, wow, the enemy is not the winter, the enemy is the environment changing. And I need to have a seasonal routine for the specific environment that I'm facing. So after I did that, it took about like 4 years for these two businesses to took off. And I'm like, wow, if it wasn't because of this, I wouldn't be here. Like, that is what I owe my success to. And then I started to recognize how many people feel this way. Like, am I that special, right? Like, or am I the only one? And I start to recognize as I start talking to friends and realize I'm not the only one. Everybody deals with the environmental changes, and everybody can benefit from this. And then that's when I really went deep into neuroscience, epigenetics, chronobiology. Like, why what I feel is something that everybody else feel. Well, this is a biological process or circadian rhythm. There is many knowledge we have now. It's a human universal process. And that's when I realized, like, okay, this is my purpose. This is what I'm gonna make out of my life now. Like, this is what I wanna help the world. This is the awareness that I wanna bring to the world, and the positive change one mind at a time.
First of all, I love that story. I want to unpack a bunch of parts of it. First, you said that your wife kind of came to you and said, like, something's not right. And I I think that a lot of people would dismiss that. A lot of people say, or I don't want to say dismiss it because I don't believe that people should dismiss their spouses, but I think that a lot of men, especially, would put the macho thing on and say, no, no, I got it. We got this. Yeah, there's stressful parts of business, stressful parts of life, whatever. I got a lot going on, but I'm good. And not lean into why. And so many people then lean into the why, realize what's going on. And then when they get to the how, they realize that how requires a certain level of vulnerability that they then don't make happen because that vulnerability requires something very important, which is being vulnerable. So I love the fact that you leaned into that. I also think that one of the amazing observations that you made is that there's a difference between the everybody has ups and downs. I think that you'll agree. I think that even with the perfect system and taking yourself aside, if someone followed your system, became the greatest student of everything that you're suggesting, there's going to be that moment when somebody gets sick, a tragedy happens, they lose, or by the way, something great happens.
Hmm.
Because part of finding balance, I think you'll agree, is that the highs can't be as high because then you got to stay here, right? And I think that
Yeah.
and I think that denying those pivots is also dangerous because then when they happen, people think that they messed up because they're emotionally impacted by it. Like who could, let's take an extreme example, who could win the lottery and not have a super high? Who could? Who could, right? Who could experience a terrible tragedy and death in a tragic death in their family or with their closest, loved one and not feel a down? That the question is, I think, and please correct me if I'm wrong, how do we make sure that the down isn't as far and the high isn't as how do we keep the gap closer?
That's the key. So the way to look at it is the yin yang. So I'm a Christian and I'm a spiritual being, and I haven't found anything better than the yin yang to look at what you are just mentioning, which is that there's gonna be a low point, there's gonna be a high point. What we want to achieve is harmony in between. So when we're talking balance versus harmony, is that in order to enter into harmony, you actually had to get out of balance. Now it's a control out of balance. Balance means that it's always a linear. It's a trap of life is linear, progress is linear. So what I used to experience when I was experiencing the winter blues, the summer hypermania, was a trend of like the stock market. It was just up and down, up and down, up and down, very dramatic, very spontaneous, very fast. Compare that to the yin yang, which is a smooth up and down throughout the year. And that is the ideal state. Why? Because our biology reacts to that environmental change. In the winter, we produce more melatonin, we produce less serotonin, we produce less dopamine. So we naturally need to slow down a little bit. I'm not talking about just don't doing anything. I'm talking about doing things differently. I'm talking about being strategic. I'm talking about testing. I'm talking about actually having an approach to that season in your life that is repeatable. It happens every single year. So a lot of the born and crash processes that I see out there is that we don't honor that rhythm. We don't even understand it to begin with. So everything starts from awareness and creating a system, a framework that will keep you in that harmony state. So it's understanding those pivoting moments happen whether you recognize them or not. They're cyclical, they repeat every single year. So it's in our best interest to understand them and create a framework that allows us to pivot slightly for some or abruptly for some. You know, there's like a very dramatic shift between summer and winter, but then there's a very slow, mild shift between summer and fall. It's like they're contrasting seasons. So understanding that gives us a lot of power to make conscious decisions of how we want our routine to look like. Because ultimately, that's the only thing we have in control. What we do every single day.
But I
That's the
have a
only thing
question.
we
But I
have
have a
under
question
control.
about that. I have a question about that. First of all, I agree with you. But I have a question about what you said just before that, and that is, how does there's a big difference between the winter and the summer. There's a big difference, but there's also a big difference between how those contrasting environmental times impact people. So how does a person know when it's something that they're feeling or something that's going on that needs to be changed versus, for instance, like I commit to working out every single day for the next 100 days. And then in 32 days, I it's icy outside and I break my ankle, right? So I can't go on my bike because my ankle is broken. That using that as an example is, so then for the next 4 weeks, I didn't fail at going on my bike because my leg is broken. I can't go on that. Now I should replace that with something else. But the point is that's not a point of like hit the road, never go on the bike again, hard stop. That's something you need to remove from your life. So
Hmm.
so taking that also to the other routines of life, how does a person know when it's a temporary stop versus I need to get rid of this behavior, routine, environment,
Yeah.
situation?
So I have a framework. Why? Because we are all unique beings. That's where epigenetic comes in place. But there are general guidelines. Now, it affects us a little different. So that's why there is a framework in place so you can plug yourself into and find it by yourself. Let me just give you a few examples. You can stop whatever you want, but one of them is sleep. If you say, I want to sleep every day by 10 p.m., that is what a successful, healthy human being does. You're going to have an easier time to do it during certain times of the year and a very hard time to do during other times of the year. So that's a behavior that has to be adjusted based on the sunset. Why? Because biologically, we know an average human being needs about 3 hours of melatonin segregation to feel sleepy at night. So that's just an example. That behavior has to adjust to the environment the same way that breaking your leg has to adjust to the environment if you want to continue to exercise. Meaning you perhaps just get on, like there's like these machines that you can exercise, right? Like there's different ways to do it. And it comes down to understanding your environment and creating a convenient routine. Let me put it this way. You could avoid having to break that leg, for example. And this happens all the time. Summertime, great time to go outdoors to run. That is the exercise of the season. You love it, great. If you don't realize that in the fall there is a change, now it's icy, now it's cold, Now, somehow your brain's telling you don't go outside. You're not as excited anymore. What kind of exercise can you bring into that time of the year that excites you? It might be this is a time to go indoors and go to the gym for the next 6 months. This might be I'm gonna play basketball with my buddies. The exercise changes and you can exercise all year round. That's the goal, but it adapts to the environmental changes.
I love that. No, I think that's important, and that gets to a question that I'm really going to press you on, and that is, you noted in the bio that you sent me. I don't know if it's in your full bio, but I just want to I want to challenge you on this line, and I told you it was coming, so let's have some fun. You say that one of the topics you love to discuss is quote replacing hustle and willpower with alignment and flow, and because this is the Keep Hustling podcast, whenever I see the word hustle, obviously I I I don't challenge it, but I have to ask, what hustle are you trying to get rid of? And what I would ask as the Keep Hustling guy is maybe we should say replacing endless, random, unstructured hustle with aligned goal setting, which is true hustle.
Yeah. So again, we all bring a perspective to the equation, and the word hustle can be interpreted from so many different perspectives. So let me tell you what the hustle I mean with hustle is grinding. It's like no matter what, you're gonna grind your way into it. You're gonna work, work, work. You're gonna find your way. You're gonna work 16 hours a day. You're gonna keep going, going, going. Now, when I mean the flow, that's another one. What is the flow means? The flow is a state where we have the ideal balance between attention and rest, between cortisol and basically the parasympathetic system and the sympathetic system, having that balance. So the key here is to understand what your biological needs are so that you can meet that flow, so you can enter into the flow, so that you can achieve more with less effort, so that you can be productive with the least amount of friction. When I hear the word hustle without identifying, like putting it together with the flow, I tend to think on grinding, on friction, on willpower. I'm going to get this done. I can do everything because mindset is everything, but then you ignore your biology. And this is the key thing. The seasons change your biology. So when your environment changes, your biology follows. How? In the way that we create hormones and neurotransmitters. I'm going to give you an example. In the wintertime, we spend less time outside. We have less outdoor connection. If we are not careful, we don't realize, but perhaps in the summertime, you were playing a baseball league that you truly enjoy, and it gives you dopamine, and it gives you adrenaline, and it gives you competition, and it got you connected with people you care about. That's gone. Why? Because that's the summer league. So how are you replacing that in the winter so that you achieve the same hormonal benefits? For me, it's basketball. I realize that. Okay, I'm going to play basketball. So that gets me into the flow in a weekly rhythm. So I break cycles. There is 4 major cycles I look into to get into that flow: your daily cycle, your weekly cycle, your seasonal cycle, and your yearly cycle. Once you achieve those cycles in flow, you basically have a non-ending loop because you learn how to get into the flow during those specific key cycles of your life.
100%. And that's what there's a reason why the hashtag, the lifestyle, the mindset, the movement that we're creating here has the word keep before the word hustling. And for me, and we've discussed this multiple times, and that's why I'm glad we're discussing this, it's the person who redefines what the word hustle means to them that is able to keep the flow. The flow of your 20s is different than the flow of your 30s. The flow of being single is different than the flow of being married. You have another person to worry about. You have another relationship you need to invest in. You have more time you need to devote. The flow of being a single or married person is much different than the flow of being a parent. And then you have other things that you have. So I think that for me, and I hope you're going to agree with this, and I think you will. And I think it's exactly what you're saying, is that real true hustle actually stimulates the flow or comes off of the flow. Because when a person is in that flow, and when a person is in the predictive flow, and I love how you talk about the different seasonal flows, then it's easy to hustle. It's
Oh, yeah.
easy. It is. It's like I tell people all the time in business. When you hit that sales run, it's easy to pick up the phone and call someone. When you made 3 or 4 good sales in a month, you get to work the next day, and you're like, you pick up the phone, and then all of a sudden the person hangs up on you, and you're like, oh, there it is. But that flow. So I think what you're saying actually stimulates hustle because it's like if the person can know how to identify what's going to impact their flow and might negatively impact them, then the person can get into the flow. When they can get into the flow, even if there's a blip, they can get right back up because that hustle can, or they know, hold on a second, something doesn't feel right in my flow. I need to redefine my hustle and then re-execute.
So I'm gonna introduce a key word, which is rhythm. Rhythm. Once you get in the rhythm of getting those 3 cells, once you get in the rhythm of being successful, once you get in the rhythm, so rhythm is key. It's very important. When you're mentioning when you get into that abrupt down or abrupt up, from a biological and routine perspective, we only get that twice a year. We only get that during daylight savings time. Because other than that, that follow, that rhythm, that yin yang literally follows because we're gaining 2 to 3 minutes of daylight or losing them every day. You live in Alaska, it might be 4 or 5, right? But that rhythm is what we want to identify and get into it biologically. Now there is some key things we gotta do on daylight savings time because it's an abrupt drop or step you have to take. And that's really what I focus on is from a neurological perspective, we know that the most important behaviors to be a healthy human individual are sleep, exercise, nutrition, outdoor connection, loving, nurturing relationships, meaningful relationships, and novelty. And that's about the order. So when we get in that rhythm and understand how to adjust those behaviors, then we're producing neurochemicals and hormones like dopamine, like serotonin, like adrenaline, like oxytocin, all these chemicals that we need to produce daily because we understand that flow.
I
So
love that.
that is really how I can modify that.
I absolutely love that. I agree with you 100%. So I think we're agreeing on what hustle is, and that's why I'm saying we're not going to replace it. Fine. Game over. Great, says the New Yorker. Um, I'm just kidding.
I love it.
I,
Yeah.
I have to ask you one more very important thing about your area of expertise. Uh, you have figured out why most routines fail and how to create routines that actually stick. Give it to me. Give it to me.
Yeah, the illusion that your routine is supposed to be 1 year long routine. That's really it. Like that is the illusion. On top of that is lineal, it's consistent. Like the trap of consistency. That is a trap. And the reason why is because the environment changes. If you stay consistent with the same routine all year round, something's gonna break. Why? Because we're talking about keeping that balance, like staying close to the medium. And when like the yin yang again, imagine you have a straight line. If you try to stick to it, you're gonna either go too low or you're gonna be too high, and something will snap. And then that creates another issue. And that creates another issue. Next thing you know, you're depressed, you're confused, you're anxiety. The idea is to stay close to that flow and create routines in a framework like structure that will follow that rhythm. So it's the illusion of consistency that makes all routines break.
What is the most important routine? Or I don't want to say easiest because I don't want the easiest, but the most important achievable routine that every person who's listening to this should be evaluating and reevaluating right now?
Forget about you go to sleep at this time throughout the year. Forget about that. Dump it in the trash. It's worthless. Keep your sleeping routine between 2 and 4 hours of the sunset. Literally. Once you figure out your sleep and you're sleeping well and you're feeling great, you're going to have more energy to exercise. You're going to have a better cognitive performance. You're going to have neuroplasticity. You're going to have autophagy. You're going to have all these benefits when you first figure out sleep. And that's why I say that's the order.
1 second, but are you
That
suggesting when you say 2 and 4 hours, you're saying to go to sleep or to wake up?
to go to sleep. There is a circadian rhythm alignment that is, wake up with the sunset, with the sunrise. I'm saying that's true, but that's inconvenient and that's impossible to do for certain people. Why? Sometimes, like I have skylights, sometimes they're just full of ice and snow.
But one
for
second.
two,
So
three
is
weeks in a
sleep.
row.
When sunset is at 4:45, you're saying that I should go to sleep by 9:45? That's 4 hours
Yeah,
later.
absolutely. Yeah, yeah. I mean, there is a healthy range, and this is the thing.
I
Okay,
love it.
let's talk about grinding. Let's
Amen. I'm
talk
going to tell
about.
my wife and kids that I have to be asleep by 9:45 in the winter now.
Well, you don't tell them. You create habits that make them go to sleep and support that. Now, this is the thing. We're all different. There is different body types. Ethnomorph will be a late, a night owl compared to mesomorphs will be an early riser. So for some people, it might be instead of 4, it might be 5 or 6, but it won't be 7. Like there is a healthy balance that can be created. And again, in the summertime, you might go to sleep perhaps at 11 p.m., and that's fine. But the hustle culture sometimes, and okay, I'm talking on this again, it's like you grind till you go to sleep and you're trying to go to sleep late and then you wake up early too. I mean, I'm just talking about the light that is out there.
No,
I'm
I
not
love
I'm
that.
not
I love
talking.
that. No, I love that. 100%. I'm with
Yeah.
you.
It's like when you watch the motivational tapes, the guy that's worth 100 million and he's saying this is the ideal routine. You grind your way into bed and you get out and grind. And the reality is that will break you. That will make you crash. You are not going to be able to support success for long periods of time. You have to keep in consideration recovery. And that's why I say keep your sleeping time between 2 to 4 hours after the sunset. That will change with the seasons. And there is a way, behavioral modifications, environmental modifications to make it happen smoothly. But that's a lot of
I'm gonna
detail
say
at that
something
point.
crazy, but I think you're gonna agree with it. I find that when the people who are worth hundreds of millions of dollars or billions of dollars tell you that you need to grind until the end, they keep grinding. I have the number one tell that they're lying. And that is when they make the billions, they stop doing that. Right?
Yeah,
Meaning everybody
yeah,
tells you, do this, grind out, and all of a sudden you find out that when they can afford the private jet, they're actually eating healthy.
yeah,
When they can afford to not get up, that doesn't mean that they're sleeping till 11 a.m. That's not what I'm saying. But when they can afford to not grind it out and sleep overnight on an airplane and actually get good sleep at home every single night, they're doing that.
yeah.
So I talk about that all the time, and I totally agree with you on that.
I mean, not to get too deep into it, but the law of vibration. If you are, I mean, and it's not to get too deep into it, but if you're feeling like crap, you're going to attract crap. If you're feeling great and you're feeling rested and you have a good mindset, you're going to attract that. So, 8 hours is kind of like the ideal time to sleep. Some people do better with more, with less, but it's just keeping that in check. And that changes by the season.
100%. 100%. I love that. We're gonna have to do another conversation, a deeper dive. I love this. I love, again, I appreciate you making the time. I love what you're having to say. I love the fact that we're able to dig into hustle, what it really means, and how your life has really changed and how you're changing the lives of others. So, Ruben, really thank you so much for being here. As you know, I'm like pumped up with energy right now. I'm ready to I should work out right now, even though I got to work. You inspired me. As you know, we have a close tradition on this podcast where we ask our guests to leave us with their favorite motivational or inspirational quote. So I'm going to turn the floor over to you again. I'm going to tell everyone to check out Ruben Gomez. He's awesome. If you've gotten this far in this episode, you can feel his energy, and that's really what's important. Because you too can have that energy, and you too can have that lightful and yin and yang in your life if you follow what he's talking about. So you should definitely follow him. So with that, Ruben, I'm going to turn it over to you for your favorite motivational, inspirational quote and say thank you once again.
All right, this is not as much as a quote, but something that changed my life, and is that when human civilizations found the seasons and learned how to sow a seed in the springtime, gave them the results in the fall time instead of the other way around, that's when we became who we are. So understanding the seasons in your life is probably the most important thing we have to go back to, because we think that we know better. We think that we can forget about that. We think that we are closer to an iPhone than a dog, but we're a human being. And going back to our roots is what we need, which is simply paying attention to the seasonal changes in our environment. It's that simple.
I love that. Ruben, thank you again for being here.
You're welcome, Aaron.
This has been another episode of Keep Hustling. Remember, do well by doing good, and of course, and always, in the right mindful way, keep hustling. All right, hustlers, that brings us to the end of another fantastic episode. Thank you for listening. Be sure to subscribe to our podcast so you never miss an episode. If you have any suggestions, comments, or even just want to say hello, please feel free to reach out to us on all social media platforms. We are Keep Hustling Pod. Until next time, stay curious, stay hungry, and keep hustling.